guys? Sarah, the real simple mama, with some chickens and some tomatoes. And as usual, I smell like garlic. So they are getting a treat right now of tomatoes and raw garlic that you can see. Here comes Flopsy Bird. And I wanted to do a quick video because, as usual, I have gotten some great information from looking online, from asking people in the local forums, people who have chickens in the same area that I do. So, of course, we deal with a lot of the same weather, a lot of the same issues. And I just found out about something recently, and I was like, that's kind of random and weird, but it's also kind of cool. So I'm going to talk today about peat moss. And what is it? Why might I want it? What would be cool about it? So just a quick background. I've got 5 chickens here outside of San Antonio, and our problem is that, of course, we are in just a residential area, a normal backyard, and there is a zone for the chickens back here. And over the last few years on this is an older home, we've done drainage and stuff to try to help the property because we are, actually our hurricane season is pretty much over now. But yeah, even in San Antonio, a good 2 or 3 hours from the coast, we have to deal with hurricane season and getting ridiculous amounts of rain that, you know, it comes down so fast that it can't all soak into the ground. So, oh, we're playing keep away with some tomato. So, you know, we don't get hurricanes per se, but we do get a ridiculous amount of water. And the problem with having chickens is, of course, they destroy the ground. So the grass in this area is pretty much gone. And I've tried to add, you know, texture and a little bit of mulch and dead leaves and, you know, building things and adding plants and things as I've been able. But a lot of this just turned into a mud pit for a while, and it's just gross. So a lot of people in the local forums were raving about peat moss. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, I've heard of it, but I couldn't tell you exactly what it is or why it's good. So what they told me was that peat moss, if you spread it around over your ground, it absorbs so much water that to the chickens, I mean, everything feels fairly dry, and you don't end up with a gigantic mud pit where your chickens like to dig around. And I thought, well, I mean, if it's affordable, then I've got to try this because, I mean, this is ridiculous. And honestly, if your chickens are in a fairly small zone, I mean, I'm never going to be able to propagate, like, you know, sod here or anything like that. I mean, maybe if I paid to do the whole area, but if I just put down a little bit, I mean, you guys know what would happen is that it'll all just get eaten. So we do want to add another grazing box. We are going to add some other stuff, but I mean, there's going to be areas of this chicken yard, of this chicken run, it's always just going to be dirt. So if you've seen some of my other recent videos, you've seen that this has been like suspiciously just sitting here, this peat moss. You can get it at Walmart, at Lowe's, at any, you know, kind of place that sells dirt or mulch and things like that. But before I get into the price and like what we did with it and things like that, what is peat moss? Peat moss is this horrible word that I don't even want to try to pronounce. Sphagnum. It's a group of mosses, and essentially what happens is it's extremely absorbent. It's a short-leaved moss that can grow, you know, it propagates really easily, and when it's called peat moss, that means it's basically been dried and harvested. So it still basically has the properties of the plant, but it's not living anymore. So it looks like a fine dirt. It's brown now, it's not green. And this peat moss has, you know, educational materials on the back, but essentially it just says it absorbs a ridiculous amount of water and it holds it in internally instead of turning to mud, because it's not dirt, right? It doesn't come from the earth. It's plant material. So it doesn't respond like dirt and then it gets muddy or whatever. And so what is recommended is, you know, you can put it over the ground and then mix it in with the soil, or you can just spread it like a ground cover, and you can use it for different ways. And so what I did is I used, I had 2 of these containers or 2 of these bags, and I've opened one and I left one so you can see again, you know, just the spelling of everything, like freeze frame right here, so that you can see what it's called and what it looks like. But this is essentially what it looks like. So here, you know, we've got dirt, and I mean, there's a lot of rocks on this property for some reason. And then this is the peat moss. So it's very soft, it's very fine. Again, it's plant matter, it's not dirt. And of course, since I've put it down, of course, you know, now we're not going to get any rain, right? Because now I'm ready. But I'm interested to see that package being, I believe it said 3 cubic feet, and that was $12 at Lowe's, I believe. It does go on sale a couple bucks cheaper. It just depends on when you grab it. And now I kind of know whenever I see it on sale, you know, when I'm going and looking for, you know, misfit plants, you know, at Walmart clearance and things like that, I'll keep my eyes out for peat moss. that I can spread it around. So this is a thin layer that I made. I mean, obviously this is way farther than 3 feet if we're talking, even just talking cubic feet. And it's not, I didn't do a thick layer. And of course the chickens are going to dig in it and move it around, so I didn't want to be too precise. But I mean, this whole area turned into a mud pit because they like to dig over here. And so I'm curious to see what's going to happen when it rains, but hopefully this zone, you know, will not just look like a disaster, because what I ended up doing is grabbing big branches and putting it over here to try to just keep them out of the worst of the mud. Now, is mud dangerous for chickens? No, of course not. But, you know, I was dealing with one recuperating from bumblefoot. This one that you're looking at right now has got worms. And so it's like, we don't need to be getting in more like nasty junk. It's a difficult transition if you have chickens, if you didn't grow up on a farm, if you weren't raised with a lot of outdoor animals, because for me it's a very foreign concept even now to be like, but I don't want them to be dirty. They're my babies. And it's like, no, they're an outside pet, like that's what they do, but they're my babies. So the only problem with the area that I did put the peat moss down is the part that had the most mud, like I guess the area that you know, was most desperate to get something amended to it. But the problem is their coop is way over here. So eventually I'd like to have just a long path that's got peat moss, and then we'll see how that does. I thought about adding some into the dust bath. I'm probably not going to do that, but we're going to add peat moss and then see if that's a better solution for mud. Now, we've talked in other videos, and some of you guys like Dean and JA, there's a lot of people who have made comments and opinions on what works for you as far as what kind of stuff do you just put on the ground. Again, you know, unless your chickens have a huge free range area, they're going to kill the grass. Like that's just, they're not deliberately trying to be destructive, but either them eating it or them scratching around and foraging, like it's just going to happen. So you have to start figuring out, all right, do I want to just leave it with dirt, or do I want to put something down? You know, and of course my concern was trying to get my birds out of the mud, and just raise the level here in the low areas. So you can certainly, you know, grass clippings works as long as they're not super long, you know, because then we get into chickens trying to eat it and it being so long that it gets, you know, impacted crop, and then that's a huge problem. You can grab, I mean, I've gotten, you know, this live oak is perpetually shedding leaves, so I've just raked up piles of leaves and thrown them over here, and bugs will hide in it and they can dig around, and it's something fun and exciting for them to do. And then even once it's already in here, you know, rake it around and just kind of change the shape or give them a little leaf pile to dig through, you know, and that can amuse them over and over again as those leaves decompose. A lot of people said, you know, mulch is a good idea. There are, I believe Dean taught me there are 2 different types of mulch depending on how it is mulched, the process in which it is broken down. But I just get really paranoid about the chickens cutting their feet. And again, bumblefoot has always spooked me for some reason ever since I first learned about it and saw like those horrific like bumblefoot popping pictures, and it was like, oh my god, ah! And then just thinking about them being on essentially shredded wood, like isn't it inevitable that they're gonna, I don't know. And a lot of people use mulch without problems, and they said that's also good for keeping them up out of the wet, and you know, that the mulch lasts a really long time. Depending on where you live, you can contact your city if they have any kind of you know, like pickup service, like for picking up tree branches and things like that. A lot of times either they'll come dump mulch like on your driveway for free, or you can go and pick it up if you've got a truck or, you know, a barrel or a wagon or whatever, and you can have that for free. So that's really great. And certainly if we had a vehicle to be able to do that, or if we had more friends with trucks, then we would definitely employ that, because that's a great idea. So I think I just got tired of buying bags of topsoil, because topsoil, I mean, it's the cheap stuff, right? So it's very cheap, but it's cheap because it's cheap. So you find like pieces of plastic in it, and pieces of trash, and like big old sticks and rocks, and it was just like, I don't want to be adding more of that kind of thing here. Because even if the dirt level is higher, I mean, it's still going to get wet. Right, Callie Bird? And I think most of the areas in this run, just for me, where there was standing water, that's all been remedied. So the problem is not like there's a really low spot where now we've got like standing water, because then you have to worry about mosquitoes and all kinds of other junk. What? What are you disapproving of now? Oh, Brett. But it was just, I mean, you know, stuff's going to get wet. And if it's going to get rained on, and if it's going to get wet, then I would like it to be as little of a disaster and a gigantic mess as possible, because my birds do not like to stay inside when it's wet. They'll complain a little bit, and they might go inside when it first starts to rain, but I mean, they'll come out and look ridiculous and pathetic and be all wet because they're like, man, I don't want to stay inside. So trying to help with that situation. The other thing that I'm thinking about putting down, and I'm still not, I'm not convinced, is diatomaceous earth, which you can sprinkle anywhere that your chickens dust bathe, anywhere that they, you know, are digging around. There's food grade diatomaceous earth is what you want. And it's just an overall, it helps with worms and with parasites and things like that. It's a very, very, very fine powder. So one of the concerns I had with it was just, they say, you know, you have to be very careful when you spread it, when you open it, and when you're dealing with it. Look at her contorting herself back there. Because the dust is so fine, you need to be careful that you don't breathe it in, and you don't want your kids around when you're doing it or anything like that. So that's a little side note that I would maybe add some, although I've read that the benefits don't really work if it gets wet. So I think in my case, I wouldn't bother putting it out here in the yard that I'm showing you. I also don't really want it in the nest boxes, so it would maybe go down there, maybe just go in their interior dust baths that they've made in there. I don't know. But I just wanted to get on and talk to you real quick about peat moss, because I opened it up and just playing with the texture, it's like, oh, that's what it is. And it feels really, really fine and really soft. And of course, as soon as I opened the bags and I was dumping out that first bag, the chickens were like, what's this? What's this? Oh, this looks fun. Let me dig in it. Oh, are you trying to make this look even? Oh, well, let me come and screw that up for you. You know, it was like nosy birds right in my face. But I mean, even for it just being something new and something different, like they've been over there all day. Somebody has been playing over there in that peat moss. So I'll be interested to see what it looks like once it actually rains, to see as compared to the dirt around it. You know, does that look like it stays drier? Does it look like it stays less messy and less gross? We'll have to see. But check out peat moss. It might be an affordable option for you. I'm excited. I'm looking to buy more, and I'll just be dumping it all over the place. But let me know what you are using. What kind of materials do you get? Do you put, you know, in the coop, in the ground here, because this is technically outside, right, but it's covered, as well as just out in their yard. Is there something that you found that works for you, something that spooks you, a trick or a hack? I'm also curious in your experiences with diatomaceous earth. So just hopping on here real quick to say, yay, I did peat moss. And I'll let you know what we think about it. But I'm Sarah, the Real Simple Mama. There's an angry squirrel barking at me, and we are going to go make pizza. I hope you guys are well. Let me know what you think in the comments.